Okay, welcome. In this video, we're going to go over the steps to solving an equation with fractions. And the main idea is using the number 1 to rewrite equations. And the idea is this: if I take 1, I times it by that 7/8, I get 7/8 back. Well, what happens if I use 1 as 2 over 2? I times 2 to the numerator, 2 to the denominator, I get 14 over 16. Now we know that 1 times anything is that same number, and we've done this a lot. If I take 1 times 100, I get 100, right? If I take 1 times 1,000, I get 1,000. I get the same number back. So that means this number and this number are still the same thing. They don't look the same. This can simplify back to 7/8 just by dividing the top by 2 and the bottom by 2, but that still is 1. So I pull out that 1 that's written as 2 over 2 and I get this back. That's the idea that we're using. Now the other idea is this. When you have an equation, and if I can get all the denominators to be the same number, it doesn't matter what that number is. I have an 8 here. If I can get an 8 there in the bottom, I can change this 2 to an 8. I can change that 11 to an 8. Then I can drop my denominators and I end up with just stuff like this. I end up with integers. Okay? That's what we're trying to do here. So we're going to take something that's complicated and we're going to turn it back into this form where it looks like ax plus b equals ax plus b, where we have a variable term plus a number, a variable term plus a number, and so forth. Okay, so we're going to get started. So number 1, the first step is everything needs a denominator. Okay, everything does. So I have a 7 over 8 here. That qualifies. But this constant here doesn't. So I'm going to put a 1 there. If it doesn't have a denominator, what we have to use 1 if needed. Okay. Now, the negative 1/2 does. And then the 11 needs a denominator of 1. The next step is find a common denominator. Now the easiest way to do this is just multiply all your different denominators together. So I have 8 times 1 times 2, that will give me 16. That means I'm going to change all my denominators here in this problem to 16, and I'm going to use this property of 1 to do it. Okay? So step number 3 is write equation with new denominators. So write equation with common denominator. I'm just going to use C dot D for common denominator. Okay, so here's how we do it. I'm going to take 7 over 8. Over here, I'm going to take a negative 6 over 1. Now we have this side. I have a negative 1/2, and I have a negative 11 over 1. Well, what do I multiply 8 by to get 16? Well, you can see right here, the 8 times 2 is 16. This 8 is missing a 2. So if I do it on the bottom, I do it on the top. Now let's go over here. Let's do the negative 6 over 1. Well, 1 times 16 has to be 16. The 1 is missing both the 2 and the 8. So it gives me the 16 and the 16. Now right here, I'm looking at the negative 2. Well, the negative 2 needs the 8. So I do 8 on the bottom, 8 on the top. And on this last one over here, the 1 is missing the 16, so I do 16. And now all my denominators are 16. Now let's go ahead and figure out what my numerators are. Okay, so we're going to do our rewrite right here. So I have 14 over 16. Remember that has an x with it. Don't drop your variable. This becomes a negative 96 over 16. Now the left-hand side is a negative 8 over 16. Don't forget the x. And then this one over here will be a negative 176 over 16. Now, if you take a look at this, all our denominators are the same. In algebra, remember, if I do something to one side, I have to do it to the other. Well, I can drop the 16s on both terms here. That allows me to say, hey, I need to drop them over here. I've done the same thing to both sides, so I have not broken the equality of this equation. Just like if I would add, subtract, or add 6 to both sides, I'd have to do 6 to both sides. Okay? So that's what we're doing right here. Okay? All right, now we end up with this. 14x minus 96 equals a negative 8x minus 176. Oh, I forgot step 4. Step 4 is drop denominators. And then we end up with this. And now we're going to solve this just like we did the last section that we did. I'm going to take this to 0. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. I'm going to take this to 0. We zero out the variables on the right-hand side. We zero out the constants on the left. So that goes to 0. Okay. Now I'm going to do this to this side. And I get a negative 80. And over here I get 22x. So now I have 22x equals a negative 80. Divide each side by 22. I get a 1x, and I get a negative 80 over 22. Now right here you've got to use Desmos. I can't bring Desmos up in my camera. So you're going to use Desmos to simplify.